Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into a fascinating news broadcast that really unpacks the intense cultural and political friction happening right now within the American left. We're looking at a party navigating a very vocal, highly active socialist wing and examining exactly how mainstream political commentators are reacting to it. Our goal today isn't to take sides, but to jump into this news desk-style analysis, map out the source material, and understand exactly what is driving this divide.
Here's how we're going to break this down today. First up, the Netanyahu arrest push. Then we'll hit the legal limits around that, move on to the Hassan Piker speech controversy, dig into the criticisms of wealthy socialists, and finally, wrap up with the broader Democratic divide. Let's get into it.
All right, Section 1, the Netanyahu arrest push. We're looking at a local New York politician trying to make a massive international move.
Just to quickly ground us, we're talking about the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America. They're a really prominent political movement on the American left. And the politician at the center of our first story, Zohran Mamdani, is a well-known socialist figure tied directly to this movement. Understanding his political alignment is key to understanding the broadcast's coverage of his actions.
So the broadcast highlighted this incredibly bold quote from Mamdani. He said, "I believe Mr. Netanyahu belongs in The Hague. Whatever law allow me to do in New York City, that is what we will do." He was literally pushing to arrest Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu under international criminal court charges during his upcoming UN visit. I mean, think about that for a second. A local city representative attempting to enforce international criminal charges.
As you might expect, the pushback was swift and scathing. Netanyahu's camp fired back, basically saying Mamdani should focus on fixing the damage his own policies have caused right there in New York. They accused him of using this whole international arrest threat as a giant smokescreen for his local policy failures instead of going after the leader of, in their words, the only democracy in the Middle East.
Moving right along to Section 2, legal limits and backlash. Let's look at where federal law meets local ambition. Now here's where the political rhetoric slams right into a brick wall of legal reality. As figures like Mike Waltz pointed out on the broadcast, there are some major glaring roadblocks here. Number one, the United States isn't even a member of the International Criminal Court. Number two, federal law actually forbids state and local governments from cooperating with ICC requests. And on top of all that, visiting prime ministers have UN diplomatic immunity. So the bottom line from the commentators was pretty blunt. Running U.S. foreign policy and running New York City are two completely different jobs.
Because of those absolute legal hurdles, the media reaction was pretty merciless. One commentator called Mamdani's push a fake tough guy act. The argument was, he knows he can't actually pull off this arrest, but he's doing it because it fires up his base. They also pointed back to a 2023 DSA convention where Mamdani made a highly provocative claim, saying that when the boot of the NYPD is on your neck, it's laced by the IDF. So it's a clear pattern of using really charged rhetoric to energize supporters despite the legal impossibilities.
Okay, let's shift gears to Section 3, the Piker's speech controversy.
This next flashpoint centers on a speech given to college Democrats by political commentator and Twitch streamer Hassan Piker. And the news panel focused heavily on his aggressive rhetoric against the Democratic establishment itself. Dressed in what they called revolutionary garb, Piker told the crowd, "We don't need Democrats anymore. We are coming, we are unbound, and will become undeniable." He explicitly accused mainstream Democrats of collaborating with fascists, funding ICE, and funding Israel. This was a direct, head-on attack from the far left right at the core of the Democratic Party.
The news panel's reaction to this was incredibly sharp. They immediately pointed out the massive political gift this hands to the opposition. The consensus was, Republicans are absolutely loving this stuff, and they will eagerly run midterm ads with these exact clips to claim Marxists are trying to take over the American way of life. The whole thing was so theatrical that one panelist even joked Picker's delivery sounded like that famous scene from The Office where Dwight mimics Mussolini.
Which brings us to Section 4, criticizing wealthy socialists and the hypocrisy claims surrounding them.
It's really fascinating to see how systematically the broadcast panel tore into Piker's revolutionary persona. He projects this hardcore image, traveling to China and Cuba, being subpoenaed by the Treasury Department. But the media countered that with a totally different reality. They labeled him a Nepo baby whose uncle signed his checks, and they were very quick to point out that this highly paid Twitch streamer is broadcasting anti-capitalist rhetoric from a $3.5 million gated Hollywood mansion. It's a stark contrast between his message and his lifestyle.
To be fair, the broadcast did highlight Piker's own defense against these hypocrisy claims. He's previously stated he would rather be a rich socialist than a broke person defending capitalism.
And you know what's interesting? One of the commentators actually conceded the point, admitting that while they found the hypocrisy insane, Piker was at least being completely honest about his preference for wealth here.
All right, let's zoom out to the macro level for Section 5, the broader Democratic divide.
So what do these two local flashpoints actually tell us about the larger internal conflict? The broadcast featured mainstream Democrats who were sounding the alarm. They pointed to factions cheering for an intifada and the DSA advocating for the takeover of key industries, which the panel flat-out labeled as communism. They also called out extreme policy pushes, like demands for no police, no prisons, no deportations, and claims that Israel shouldn't even exist. For the mainstream Democrats on the panel, these are just terrible, unworkable ideas that actively alienate voters.
And to really hammer home the severity of this internal friction, the broadcast cited a report from Axios. And this quote gets right to the heart of the matter. This is proof the party can't govern. The commentators argued that with younger generations adopting these radical stances, even comparing the atmosphere to a return to the days of McCarthyism, the internal fracturing is so intense, it actually threatens the Democratic Party's fundamental ability to unify and govern the country effectively.
Which perfectly sets up the exact, highly provocative question the original broadcast anchors used to close out their segment. After unpacking the local legal stunts, the radical speeches, and the deep ideological rifts tearing at the party's fabric, they asked, "Are Democrats too late? Has the cancer overrun the body?" It is a genuinely stark question about the long-term survival of a coalition stretched this thin. So ask yourself, how will these internal dynamics shape the policies that affect all of us moving forward? What does it mean for the future of American political stability? Thanks so much for hanging out with me for today's Explainer. I hope this deep dive gave you some real clarity on a super complex debate.